morning. How are you?
Good.
Hi, I'm Jessica.
Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you. Thank you for coming out here.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you so much. You nervous?
A little bit. My mom and dad, they had a very tumultuous type of relationship, if there is a word to describe it. And very early on, I just began to deal with intense animosity between the two. And around the time I was 6 years old, that's when things really got a little bit more shaky. And my mom and my dad, they ended up divorcing in 1999, shortly before I was 7. And what brought that about was my dad was very abusive to my mom, and then he began to be abusive towards me. And
he was abusive in what way? Verbally or physically?
both.
Both.
But
And how was that divorce from your parents? How was that for you?
as I said, I love them both. And it split me up. It was really kind of tearing me up on the inside when they did divorce. But at the same time, it felt like a relief, because I know like maybe things from this point on will get better. And this is what I'm thinking as a 7-year-old. But despite my belief, it didn't come to fruition. It just got worse. And I lived with my mom for about 6 to 7 years. And then she developed a really bad drug habit. And then the family court deemed that it was unsafe for me to live with her, so they put me back in the house with my dad. And then after that period, it just got progressively worse with dealing with his antics.
How did things get worse?
The darker chapter of my life. There was verbal and physical abuse. It would go from the kicking, the punching, like slapping, to more things that were like death threats and attempts at cutting me.
Death threats? What would he say?
When I was visiting my dad, when they were going through the divorcing period, when I was living with my dad would say things like, well, he'd always belittle my mom and degrade me in the process. But he'd say things like, you're a bitch of a mom, I can't wait till she dies, I can go pull the plug on her grave, I can go pull the plug on her, and then I'm gonna go take a shit on her grave and make you watch. And this is really, it screwed me up, it messed me up. And I'm like 6, 7, 8 years old hearing things like this. That was one example of the many things he would say.
Do you recall how you felt as a 6 or 7-year-old when your own father says things like that about your mom?
Dirty. Dirty and ashamed in a sense that I felt that it wasn't right. And then, in his own way, I believe he tried. And part of him loved me, but a bigger part of him hated me. And the reason why I felt that way is because of my mom. And he would see me in her. He'd say why can't you quit being like your fucking whore of a mom? You can do it right. You're an Eversoul. You're not like that bitch. I feel weird cussing in here, but I'm trying to be as real and as open as possible. And the darkest point of my life, period, the day that led me here, it was like a domino effect. It was progressive, and my mom and I, we contacted, she did, and they asked me questions and I answered them. But she had contacted Child Protective Services, local sheriff's department, local police department, the neighboring sheriff's department. We'd explain to them what my dad was doing, and they'd follow the reports, and they said we'd look into it. We'd show them bruises, and nothing was done. Pictures may have been taken, but nothing was done.
So how did it feel for you as a child that the local authorities were aware of what was going on in your house and you didn't get any help? How did it affect you?
I felt helpless and also hopeless. I didn't know the means by which we could end this nightmare. He woke up, he literally pulled me out of bed and threw me to the floor. And he was screaming at me like, "Where's this four-wheeler? Where's this four-wheeler?" And then, to give a real brief synopsis of the day, he's screaming at me, yelling at me to get these things done. And then my friend, who's extremely nervous about this, he hasn't heard from me all day. And then I kept seeing his actions against me. And he kept saying, "If we don't find that fucking four-wheeler, and if I find out you're involved, I'm gonna fucking kill you, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you, I'm gonna slit your throat." Like, he was saying different things throughout the day. And the more and more he was saying them, the more and more I was taking him serious, because he had usually not said it that many times in a given time frame. Maybe it was like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde effect. Maybe he didn't want to believe it. Maybe he was trying to convince himself that he wasn't that way, that he didn't push my mom through a shower cracking her ribs, or he didn't almost get me killed whenever she was putting up wallpaper when she was pregnant with me. And he had pushed me down. This is right before it happened. He pushed me down on the ground, and the very last words my dad told me, and what made my brain just realize, like, okay, it's this do or die, and it has to end. My dad told me that, "I'm gonna beat you the way I beat Pamela," just like that. "I'm gonna beat you like I beat Pamela."
Pamela's your mom?
Pamela's my mom. And something in my brain, just some instinctive part of me just knew that I had to do something. And I go to my room, and I get the gun, and I go into the hallway, which is in line with the laundry room, and I shoot my dad. And it was like a feeling of 1,000 pounds being lifted off my shoulders. But in the same sense, immediately after it happened, I just realized, oh my God, I just killed my dad.
Did he die right away on the floor?
Right.
Yeah. So where did you hit him?
In the side, and then in 2 shots in the side, and then in the head. I walked closer to the head because I didn't want him to just lay there. I wanted it to end. I'd never seen the look on his face before, like he finally realized he messed up, and the final look I saw in his eyes before he finally died was one of sorrow, and that he was saying he's sorry, and that I felt sorry after I did it. I guess you can only take so much, and it's like a dog or an animal. If you push the animal into a corner, like, you can throw rocks at it, you can kick at it, but eventually, despite your size and despite the animal size, it's eventually going to bite back.
I've felt most of my life I've been terrified of everyone around me, because naturally a person thinks that their parents are safe and that you can trust them. But when your parents are both abusive and they treat you in such a way that you don't even know who you are anymore, you learn not to trust anybody.
How were they abusive to you?
When I was very little, very small, they didn't physically abuse me so much with beatings and such. It was more molestation back then from my mother. My dad would always berate me. He would tell me how stupid I was because I wasn't able to do mathematics like he was. He was the math guy.
You weren't?
And I was not. I was more into art. And as I got older, it was worse. As I got older, my mother was no longer able to compel me to do things with her sexually, so she would continue to slap me around as usual, except I would get harder hits this time because now I'm older and I assume they thought I could take it more. And my father would throw chairs at me and slam my head into the drawer. And so when I called the authorities, the police officer who came was in the military with my father.
So they were buddies?
They were buddies. I heard almost the entire conversation. They were like, okay, well, you know, they were going back to old times. Hey, you remember back in such and such village and whatcha. And so they were like, okay, well, there's no problems here. I'll go ahead and write in a report that it was just a minor domestic disturbance, that you were disciplining your child. No problems here. I can pretty much describe my childhood as being lost, terrified, and alone.
Your mom did well, I'm trying to put words to it, did things to you that no mom should ever do to her children or to anyone. Are you able to speak about that?
I can speak about this.
Yeah, but what were the things that she would do to you that weren't right?
When I was from the ages of about 10 and younger, she would make me lick her vagina and put my fingers in her and watch her do things to herself. And she had this dog collar she put on my neck, like a leash. Mm-hmm. And she made me like walk around like a dog in circles on the floor.
It sounds. I noticed that you're smiling while you speak about it, but it breaks my heart.
Yeah, you know, I'm trying to. It's very painful.
Yeah.
But I'm trying not to break down in front of somebody else, you know.
No, I totally understand, and I understand the coping mechanism, but it's a lot to even comprehend. So, let alone experience it.
It's always been my way to, like you said, as a coping mechanism to make myself laugh, or to go to a better place in my head, so to speak, so that I'm not thinking about the pain, the emotions that come with it. Mm-hmm. So I'm not a robot, of course, but over the years I've been able to develop a separation between my emotions and my thoughts, so that it wouldn't hurt that bad.
Like dissociate from the situation.
Right.
Yeah. That's really sad if children develop that kind of behavior. It says a lot about the trauma that's going on if you have experiences like that.
It made me think that I'm growing older and I want this to stop. And I don't want to accept this anymore.
And when did it stop for you?
It didn't until I did my crime that put me in here. My next door neighbor, Jimmy, he's my crime partner. He was there at my house, well, apartment. And we were just hanging out like usual. And my mother came into the room yelling at me, and I don't recall what it was, because she was a Filipino. So sometimes I didn't even understand what she was saying. And she had a cordless phone in her hand. It was a white, big blocky white cordless phone. And she moved right past Jimmy and started ramming this phone into my temple. And I was disoriented, and all I could do was put my hands up and just try to push this phone away.
Why was she hitting you?
I don't know. I guess she was mad about something. She came in my room yelling, so I must have done something, I imagine. Or she imagined I did something. And so she left. And Jimmy was like, you know, he turned to me, he's like, you know, Dave, she does that a lot. You should do something about it.
He witnessed it.
Right. And I said, like what? What am I going to do? And he said, you could kill her. That would put a stop to it forever.
And when he said that, because it's a harsh thing to say, what did it make you think?
Because my perceptions of reality were already skewed, it didn't seem like too bad of an idea.
And how old was he?
He was a couple months younger than me. So he was 13, I was 14.
And so what did you do?
So we came up with a plan. We said, okay, so later on tonight, when my dad is at work, we're gonna kill her. And we're gonna take the money and go off somewhere. And then if my father came back, I would do him too.
So you were planning on killing them both? And what happened?
What ended up happening was I picked up a pipe from the alleyway next to the apartment, and I thought that it would be quick and relatively painless and easy to just bam, that's it,
Smash your head?
it's over with. And so she was sleeping. So when I came in a room with the pipe and I was about to do it, I tried to build a rage and all the thoughts of what was going on. But something stayed my hand, and revulsion over myself and what I was actually going to do came over me, and I said to myself, I can't do it. Jimmy said, you know, you're a pussy. Stop being a pussy, get in there and do it.
Like your father always told you.
Like my father always told me, so subconsciously that might have, you know, spurred me. And so I went in there, and she jumped up out of bed, and she said, where's the phone? I'm gonna go call the police, I'm gonna call your father. So I tripped her, and I was hitting her with my fists. And for the first time, you know, in my life, she told me, I love you, stop doing this, why are you doing this? And I would tell her, you know, you're lying. You want to save yourself. And so I hit her a few more times, and I got the pipe, and I was kind of queasy at the prospect of scattering brain matter. And so I kind of didn't put too much power into it, and I hit her, and she went unconscious. And she was still breathing though, so I was tired. So I put my belt around her neck, and I said, okay, Jimmy, I can't do this anymore. So I walked out of the room, and I came back about 5 minutes later, and he had choked her already to death.
So you had been beating her unconscious, and he finished it off. He strangled her with the belt?
Yes. I told myself, well, it's done. There's nothing I can do now but get out of here. And so we took the body, and we were taking it downstairs, and a neighbor saw me. He said, hey, what are you doing? So he was to the right of me, so I turned to the right, and I panicked, and I dropped the body and ran. Yeah, so it was like, what do I do?
Yeah.
I didn't want to kill him because he didn't do anything to me.
You never thought of using extra violence to get away with it?
No, because the whole point of the situation was to stop what was happening to me.
To get away from your mom?
To get away from my mother and my father. That was the whole point. Paradoxically, though, at the same time that this experience has been, of course, the worst event in my life, it has also been the best growth in my life. Because through all these hardships and all this suffering that I've had to endure in here, I've had a lot of time to think and grow and mature and learn what's right and what's wrong.